I knew she'd gut the place the second she showed up in heels that cost more than our server rack. And I definitely knew it the moment she looked me in the eye across that glass conference table and said, "This isn't a hobby farm anymore." But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind. 6 months before that moment, I was in the zone, deep. Night after night, just me, the hum of the lab, and the modular grid I'd built from nothing but caffeine, aluminum, and spite. I'd crawl under workbenches with a flashlight between my teeth and a voltmeter in my bra strap. I loved it. No PowerPoints, no sycophants, just the pure, clean logic of systems talking to each other, the whisper of something beautiful taking form. Mark, the founder, got it. He didn't hover, didn't nitpick. He knew my brain better than HR ever could. He used to joke, "When in doubt, ask Nora," or better yet, ask her notebooks. Damn right, because I kept everything. Versions, sketches, notes, the weird ideas that didn't work until they suddenly did. I didn't trust cloud storage or shared folders. I trusted pen, paper, and my own offsite backups labeled with boring, unassuming names like 2019 battery ITER 3 ALT. No one knew how deep it went. While the others checked out at 6 and patted themselves on the back for submitting a JIRA ticket, I stayed. I wasn't being noble. I wasn't even being efficient. I was obsessed. And when the system finally clicked, when Module B finally stabilized on its own feedback loop, I felt like I'd invented goddamn fire. No one else had figured out that configuration. No one else had seen it from that angle. And that's when I started keeping 2 versions. One for the team, clean, scrubbed, simple. The other, mine. Dirty, complicated, full of edge case logic and undocumented brilliance. The stuff you don't teach in school. The kind of thing that makes or breaks a patent when you hit the USPTO. Oh, quick pause. If you're still listening to this and you haven't subscribed or liked the video, do me a favor and hit those buttons. 97% of people who listen don't subscribe, and it helps the team more than you know. Plus, trust me, it's only getting messier from here. Anyway, back to the lab. We were gearing up for Series B. Everything was riding on launch readiness, whatever the hell that meant. But no one asked me what state the system was in. They just wanted demo footage, flashy renders, battery icons blinking like Vegas lights. The thing is, our system wasn't ready. Not without the unfiled updates, the things I hadn't pushed, the tweaks I hadn't mentioned. I'd tested them privately, off-network, on a system I built in my garage over weekends, just in case someone started sniffing around for IP ownership clarification. And then someone did. She arrived in early spring like a spreadsheet with legs. Grace Hartley, new CTO, fresh off a tour of cutting failing startups and climbing over the carcasses. Blonde, surgical, the kind of woman who uses the phrase, scaling synergies without gagging. I gave her 2 weeks before she tried to tell me how batteries work. She lasted 3 days. First thing she did? Scrapped our sprint model. Too chaotic, she said. Replaced it with her beloved agile realignment, which translated to more meetings and less building. She installed a product manager who kept asking me if my modules could be TikTokified. And then she dropped the bomb. Retroactive IP assignments. Said we needed unified tech ownership moving forward. Mark had never made me sign anything like that. We'd had an understanding. Verbal, yes, but clear. Anything built during company hours with company tools belonged to the company. Anything else? Mine. But Grace didn't believe in gray areas. She printed out new NDAs the thickness of a Bible and started handing them around like communion wafers. I didn't sign. Not then. Not after. Instead, I went home and opened the folder labeled Nora Core. Everything I'd built in the last 4 years. Versions no one had seen. Schematics not stored on any drive but mine. Algorithms written on diner napkins, scanned, saved, time-stamped. The real system. Not the one in our demo deck. Not the one Grace's team was fluffing up for investors. Mine. I stared at the folder for a long time. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just still. Focused. Like I'd been training for this exact moment. I didn't know it yet, but I was already gone. Grace strutted in like she already owned the place. Black stilettos clicking on the epoxy floor, sleek pantsuit like she was late for a TED Talk no one asked for. She didn't shake hands. She made announcements. We're scaling fast, and that means tightening up processes. No one blinked. We were used to Mark's hands-off style, his let builders build philosophy. But now, we were being shepherded into something colder, stricter, sterile. The announcement came on a Tuesday. Mark was stepping back. Advisory only, they said, and the board had strategically appointed a new CTO to take us to the next level. I didn't even know they'd been looking. One minute, I was writing integration notes for our current module array. The next, I'm watching a LinkedIn-certified buzzword cannon power walk into our bullpen, like she was rebranding the air we breathed. She didn't waste time. Day 1, we were all pulled into a meeting. No agenda, no intro, just welcome to the new phase of leadership. She clicked through a deck full of Venn diagrams, synergy slides, and words like monetization velocity. I counted 7 acronyms I'd never heard of and 2 that were made up. Then she dropped her first real bomb. We'll be rolling out a revised project tracking system this week. All commits, tickets, and feature logs must go through the new hierarchy. Someone asked what was wrong with the old system. She smiled like a shark and said, "Nothing if you enjoy chaos." By Thursday, the hallway printer was gasping under the weight of policy printouts, new NDAs, employee contribution reconfirmation agreements, a multi-page IP consolidation and clarification document that basically said, if you've ever thought about innovation near a company coffee mug, we own it. She called it standardizing the house. I called it laying legal landmines. I didn't panic. I read every word. I opened my file drawer and pulled out my original employment contract. I flipped through my onboarding folder, the one Mark handed me himself years ago. I still had the envelope. Still had the yellow sticky note. Let me know if legal ever gives you grief. No clauses about retroactivity. No forced assignments outside of paid scheduled hours. And the magic phrase, employee shall retain sole ownership of independently developed material created off-site and not directly commissioned. I almost laughed. She didn't know what she didn't know, and that made her dangerous. That Friday, Grace summoned the engineering leads, me included, for a vision sync. We sat in the war room, a sterile fishbowl of glass and cold air conditioning, while she clicked through another deck. This time, she made eye contact like she was scanning for weakness. This isn't a hobby farm anymore, she said, like we were backwoods amateurs duct taping robots together between cornhole games. Then came the sentence that stuck like a nail in my molar. Innovation doesn't belong to individuals, it belongs to systems. And we are now the system. She slid fresh NDAs across the table like we were signing up for a loan. I didn't touch mine, just folded my hands and looked her dead in the eye. She moved on. When the meeting ended, everyone shuffled out quiet. No small talk. Just the sound of tech leads suddenly unsure whether they even understood what they owned. That night, I didn't sleep. I combed through every work doc, every time-stamped commit, every place I might have blurred the lines. And what I found, I'd been cleaner than I thought. The backups I'd started years ago, unlinked. The garage builds, unfunded. The test rigs, bought with my own damn money. The new CTO may have come in with polish, but underneath that veneer was a woman grasping for control of a machine she didn't understand, trying to retroactively own the very thing that had kept her shiny new role afloat. That's when I stopped worrying and started planning. It happened during one of those bullshit alignment meetings, the kind where half the team's pretending to take notes and the other half's praying for a fire drill. Grace was standing at the whiteboard like she invented dry erase, sketching out some convoluted new IP flow that looked like spaghetti got into a fight with a flowchart. She was throwing out phrases like value chain custodianship and innovation funnel ownership, like we were all just nodes in her little legal fantasy land. I waited until she finished her 5th loop of nonsense. Then, quietly, I asked the question. Can you clarify how the new retroactive clause affects prior off-site developments, especially ones not listed in the previous contribution matrix? She froze, just for a beat, not long enough for most people to notice, but I saw it. That flicker behind the eyes, the one that says this wasn't supposed to be brought up in public. Then she smiled. Fake. Tight, predatory. If you don't like the new policies, she said casually, like she was ordering a latte, you can leave. Laughter. Not a roar, more like snickers. Nervous, cheap little sounds from people too scared to side with reason when power's in the room. Someone muttered, "Damn," like I'd just been pantsed on the playground. She slid the revised NDA across the table like a loaded weapon, pages still warm from the printer. My name typed in bold at the top. I looked at it, then looked at her. "Appreciate the clarity," I said. No emotion, no raised voice, just the truth, delivered flat and final. I stood up, quietly, smoothed my jacket, pushed in my chair, and walked out. The whole room went still. You could have heard a resistor drop. No one said a word. I walked down the hallway, past the engineer who'd just spent 3 weeks pretending to debug code I'd fixed in 2 hours. Past the intern, Grace brought in because his resume had the word blockchain on it. Past the HR manager who once asked me if a power converter was that app we used for mood tracking. Back to my desk. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't pack in a rush. I didn't even take most of my stuff. Just the notebooks. The ones I'd kept locked up, even before things turned. The ones with the margin notes and midnight insights. I dropped them into my bag, zipped it once, and slung it over my shoulder. I paused at the photo on my desk. Me and Mark, 2 years ago, holding the first live prototype with matching dumb grins. I took that too, not for nostalgia, for documentation. Then I walked out. Past reception, past security, out into the gray parking lot under a sky that looked like it wanted to rain but couldn't quite commit. No one followed. No calls, no texts. They didn't understand what I'd just taken with me. And that was the beautiful part. They'd handed me my out. They just didn't know they'd also handed me the one thing they could never get back. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream, punch the steering wheel, or scroll through old Slack threads like some jilted ex trying to make sense of a breakup. I just drove. Slow. Windows down. That numb quiet buzzing in my chest like the world was holding its breath and waiting for me to decide who the hell I was without their ID badge hanging off my lanyard. When I got home, I fed the dog, changed into sweatpants, made coffee strong enough to knock out a priest. Then I pulled the garage door shut and walked to the workbench in the back, the one no one knew about. The one lined with years of side builds, prototypes, and rough drafts wrapped in electrical tape and stubbornness. I slid open the drawer labeled Nora Core Offline. The backups were right where I'd left them, chronologically organized, paper files and encrypted drives, burned CDs for redundancy because I don't trust cloud sync after midnight. Everything time-stamped. Everything mine. The first schematic I pulled out still had barbecue sauce on the corner from when I'd sketched it during a July 4th cookout. It was the original split-node battery regulator, something the company version still couldn't fully optimize without throttling. I'd mentioned it once during a meeting. Grace had waved it off as too bleeding edge, and now she was trying to retroactively own it. Not a chance. I powered on my personal laptop. Air-gapped. Clean. Not a single corporate trace on it. Pulled up my filing software, reviewed the diagrams, cross-checked every date. I wasn't moving on emotion. This was math. Dates. Data. Design. At 2:13 a.m., I submitted the first provisional patent. By 3:27, I'd filed 4. Each covered a separate but critical piece of the modular power platform: the independent voltage sync module, the hybrid adaptive load balancer, the external stack interface, and the auto failover logic system. All built off-site, all built off hours, all built without their money, tools, or permission, filed under my name. With full logs and backup chains attached, I read every form twice, then 3 times, clicked submit, let the confirmations roll in. The USPTO timestamps matched my originals to the hour. They couldn't touch this, not with all the NDAs in the world. They'd left the back door wide open and I'd already walked through it, twice. I leaned back in my chair, not smiling, not seething, just still. Like I'd finally exhaled after 6 years of holding my breath in a room full of people who thought they understood what building actually meant. I pulled up my email, drafted one line to my attorney. As discussed, filed, attached the receipts, closed the laptop, and slept better than I had in months. Not because I'd hurt them, but because I'd protected me. It started with little things. The kind of hiccups you don't notice unless you built the damn skeleton. Version histories getting murky. Feature logs with blank spots where dependencies should have been. Engineers passing around half-baked notes trying to reverse engineer something they thought they understood, like poking at a machine that used to hum, but now just wheezed. They kept moving toward launch, sure. The PR team spun up a countdown. The Slack channel turned into a ticker tape of celebration gifts and false confidence. But under all that glitter, something was rotting. Because the system? It wasn't behaving. Not really. They could demo the superficial stuff, spin up the UI, flash a battery icon, toggle through menus. But when it came time to test the deeper integrations, the modular handshake protocols, the dynamic voltage redistribution, it stalled. It hiccuped. It glitched in ways they couldn't trace. They kept rebooting, kept refreshing dashboards and telling each other it was probably a syntax issue. But it wasn't syntax, it was absence. You can't troubleshoot a ghost, especially when that ghost took the map with her. Word started spreading through the dev floor. Quiet. Just murmurs at first, then questions. What's up with Module B's integration doc? Did you ever get the load swap logic for the B-series prototype? Why is the fallback threshold hard-coded now? Wasn't that adaptive before? They even tried rolling back to earlier commits. But the truth was brutal. I never pushed most of it. The real stuff, the beating heart of the platform, never touched their servers. I'd logged it, tested it, confirmed it, but only in the versions I'd built at home. The ones they didn't know how to ask about, because they never cared how it actually worked. And now? Now they needed it to explain the damn thing to licensing. Apparently, the partner firm doing the IP compliance review had flagged a red zone. Specifically, Core Module B appears incomplete, ownership record unclear, missing provenance chain for adaptive loop. Translation: you're trying to sell something you can't prove you own. The legal team sent a ping to Grace. I wasn't there, obviously, but I can picture it. Her jaw tight, dismissive wave. Just clean it up. She didn't understand that you can't scrub away absence. You can't mask the fact that the core logic was built outside her reach, beyond her sandbox, by someone who no longer sat at her table. I was out, but my absence had a shape. A hole the size of the truth. 2 weeks later, I got a message. Not from Grace, not from legal, from a junior dev I barely knew. One of the quiet ones. Sharp, observant. Always asked the right questions when no one else was paying attention. His message just said, "Hey, did you actually walk with the core IP?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "I walked with what was always mine," and hit send. No emojis, no smiley face, just the answer they were too arrogant to ask before they tried to erase me. It unraveled faster than they could gaslight it. A partner firm, one of the big ones, real capital, real teeth, stepped in to run final diligence ahead of their Series B announcement. Grace must have been riding high, planning her keynote, practicing that performative little pause she does before saying disruptive. Then the due diligence packet hit legal. And like clockwork, the questions started. Can you provide chain of ownership documentation for modules A through D? Where are the original design assignments for core module B? Who is listed as the patent originator for the adaptive node algorithm? They tried to patch it up with internal logs, but the dates didn't line up. The commits were vague, backups were incomplete, and the kicker? A single line at the bottom of the IP schedule from the partner firm's rep, probably the kind who's seen every kind of scam and scramble. Significant elements appear to have been developed independently. No assignment documentation found. That's when the emails started flying. Grace must have had her assistant on triple espresso trying to locate anything that would prove I'd signed over the crown jewels. She couldn't, because I hadn't. And here's the thing about provisional patents. Once they're filed and time-stamped, they're basically landmines for people like her. You don't even need a courtroom, just one investor with a lawyer who knows how to read. They were backed into a corner, and she knew it. The arrogance didn't drop, not at first. Instead, she leaned into it. I got the message at 6:14 p.m. on a Friday. The subject line, "Let's talk." The body of the email, cute stunt, very thorough, but we both know this ends the same way, back at the table. Name your terms. No greeting, no signature. Just that smug, passive-aggressive stench of someone who still believed this was a negotiation. I stared at the screen, sipping cold coffee that tasted like burnt hope. I could almost hear her heels pacing some overpriced conference room, waiting for my reply like she still held the cards. But she didn't. She was holding an empty deck, and I wasn't playing anymore. I didn't respond. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. Because here's the truth. She had already answered her own question. She'd tried to own me with a piece of paper, but paper burns, and the thing I'd built, it was already protected. Already mine. She just hadn't figured out yet that silence was the sound of her empire cracking, and I wasn't about to stop her from listening. They booked the investor roadshow at some sleek co-working fortress downtown, the kind with kombucha on tap and conference rooms named after dead philosophers no one there had actually read. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I had people. You don't spend 6 years building something without a few alliances that outlast your exit. And so I heard everything. The main room was packed. Slick presentation on the screen, Grace front and center in her signature blazer that probably cost more than our original lab bench. Behind her stood 2 engineers I barely recognized, new hires, shiny and nervous, flanking the demo unit like guards at a royal funeral. It started smooth. Grace rattled off metrics like she was reading from a teleprompter hardwired into her jaw. Scalable, sustainable, disruptive. The holy trinity of empty promises. Investors nodded, clicked their pens, adjusted their posture like they were preparing to get rich by osmosis. Then came the Q&A. First question, can you walk us through the voltage mapping algorithm, specifically how the node balancing is maintained under dual input conditions? She blinked. One of the engineers looked at the other like, do you have this, or should I pretend to throw up? Silence. Then some mumbling. Something about dynamic load feedback and threshold modulation. Gibberish. Incorrect gibberish. I know because I built it. They were trying to reverse engineer a black box with crayons and ego. Second question, what's your patent status on the adaptive modular framework? Grace stepped in like she was rescuing a toddler who just face-planted. We're in the process of finalizing the patent claims, she said, smooth and confident, like she wasn't already bleeding from the seams. That's when the investor leaned forward. He was older. Gray hair, sharp suit, the kind of man who didn't blink unless it cost money, and he smiled, but not kindly. No, he finalized them, he said. Grace froze. The room stilled. The investor lifted a document, 2 pages printed and circled, and read aloud, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Filed under independent ownership, time-stamped prior to your revised employment agreement. We already checked. I wish I'd been there to see her expression. Some say she swallowed hard. Others say she stared at the slide deck like it betrayed her. All I know is the demo ended there. The rest of the meeting was a slow-motion unraveling. Investors packed up early. One whispered something to his associate, who promptly closed his laptop like it was contaminated. A junior analyst shot Grace a look like, "You didn't think we'd do our homework?" No one shouted. No one made a scene. It didn't need theatrics. It was worse than that. It was a quiet reveal. And silence, when it comes wrapped in legal filings and revoked trust, is louder than any explosion. By Monday morning, the whisper became a headline, internally at least. Grace was reassigned. That's what the board memo said. A tidy little euphemism wrapped in corporate gauze. No apology, no admission. Just, effective immediately, Grace Hartley will transition to a strategic advisory role focused on non-technical initiatives. Translation, she'd been benched, quietly, permanently. I didn't gloat, didn't pour a drink or blast Springsteen and dance around the garage. That kind of victory's for people who don't understand how fragile power really is. Me? I just read the memo twice, closed the tab, and got back to my notes. Later that afternoon, I got the email. Not from the board, not from her, from someone smarter. A partner firm, one of the investors who'd been at the roadshow, who'd watched the system fall apart the moment someone asked a real question. The subject line was simple. Let's discuss a license agreement. They weren't bluffing. They were prepared. The attachment was a preliminary draft. Clean, respectful, and exactly what Grace thought she could strong-arm out of me 2 weeks ago. Only this time, my name wasn't a bargaining chip. It was the headline. They wanted the core tech, and they were willing to pay. On my terms. Licensing, yes. but not to the company, not to the shell Grace had tried to run like a brand acquisition. To them. Directly. A new firm, a new entity, one that respected origination, that saw value in engineering rather than just packaging. There was no pressure, no flattery, just clear numbers, clear boundaries, and the one thing I hadn't seen in months, actual respect. I didn't say yes right away. I let the silence sit for 24 hours. I wanted them to feel the difference, the weight of not having me, and the weight of finally recognizing why that mattered. When I did reply, it was one sentence. I'm open to licensing, provided exclusive rights are granted to your firm, not the company. They agreed within the hour. By the end of the week, we had a provisional licensing agreement signed. My name was front and center. The terms were clean, renewable, and enforceable. No balloons, no champagne, just leverage. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. The final pitch was supposed to be their redemption arc. CEO in his navy blue casual trust sweater. 2 engineers sitting stiff in their chairs, blinking like they hadn't slept in 3 days. The investor's name alone was enough to make junior staff hold their breath. Serious money, serious power, serious consequences if this call didn't land. Slide deck ready, branding slick. Fonts sanitized to death. Except it was still missing the one thing they couldn't fake. The heart. They started with fluff. Market trends, projections, Grace's ghost still haunting the bullet points, phrases like scalable integration and proprietary stack logic floating around like they meant something. The CEO threw around numbers so big they barely sounded real anymore. Then came the pause. The investor held up a hand. Can you walk us through the core functionality? Specifically, how the system achieves real-time adaptive voltage mapping under modular load? The room froze. A glance between the engineers. Legal leaned forward, hands steepled, and tried to spin. While the full stack is in an ongoing evolution, our design principles reflect a robust approach to... The investor cut him off. I'm not asking for principles. I'm asking what your system does. Right now. Today. How it works. Another silence. Longer this time. Then, softly, like he'd been waiting for someone else to say it, a voice from the back finally broke. We don't own it. The room collapsed under the weight of those 4 words. No more spinning, no pivot to roadmap synergy, just truth, raw and overdue. The investor leaned back, let the silence breathe. Then, with the kind of disappointment that hits harder than yelling, he just said, understood, and clicked off. The call ended. No summary, no thanks for your time. No follow-up link, just a screen gone dark. Back in my home office, the light from my monitor lit up the soldering station, the sketch pad, the patent folders arranged like dominoes across the desk. I sipped lukewarm coffee, opened a new application, and started drafting again. New structure, cleaner logic, something better. A fresh idea born from the ashes of what they tried to steal. Above my monitor, taped slightly crooked, was a yellow sticky note. 4 words in my own handwriting. Next time, let them talk first.